Hey there, Faithful Politics family. Will Wright here. I've got something special to share with you. Something we've been working on for the past year. It's an audio narrative series called Heavenly Homeland that dives deep into the topic of Christian nationalism, which is something that's been making the headlines and stirring lots of conversations in homes, churches, and political circles. I'll be back in a bit to tell you more about the details, but I wanted to at least pique your interest if I could. So in the meantime, hope you're doing amazing and enjoy the rest of the show.
The activity that I wrote about is hate crimes, but vandalism attacks targeting Jews, African Americans, LGBTQ folks. It's important to say, though, that they aspire to more extreme violence because their online chatter is valorizing mass shooters and industrial sabotage. They're part of an accelerationist tendency in the white supremacist movement that rejects elections and political solutions. To achieve their objectives, they feel like they need to bring about a collapse of American society.
Hey, welcome back, Faithful Politics listeners and viewers. If you're watching us on our YouTube channel, I'm your political host, Will Wright, and I'm joined by your faithful host, Pastor Josh Burtram. How's it going, Josh?
Doing well. Thanks, Will.
Hey, and this week we are delighted to have with us Jordan Green. He's an investigative correspondent based in Greensboro, North Carolina, who covers right-wing extremism for Raw Story. His work's been featured in a host of publications, including the Washington Post, Daily Beast, The Nation, In These Times, Sojourners, and many more. And he's here today to talk with us about, wait, is this right? Nazis? So welcome to the show, Joshua. Nice. Or I'm sorry, Jordan. My apologies.
Yeah,
thank you,
great
Will.
to be here. Thank you for having me, Will and Josh.
Yeah. So I guess I would be remiss if I didn't ask, like, we're here to talk about Nazis, but weren't the Nazis defeated, like in World War II? Like, why are we talking about Nazis?
Yes, they were. And then there was an American Nazi Party that was founded not too long after that. This is a continuous history. Where I live in Greensboro, there was notoriously a massacre carried out again by a coalition of Klansmen and Nazis against labor and anti-racist activists who were members of the Communist Worker Party. For those who don't know, the Nazis attacked the beginning of this march in a black public housing project in Greensboro. The killings were carried out on video cameras, and the Nazis and Klansmen were acquitted in 2 criminal trials on the self-defense because although the Nazis fired the first shot, they were warning shots into the air. And I may have this somewhat wrong, so I apologize for that. But there was a self-defense, successful self-defense strategy. And Kathleen Ballou has written about the Greensboro Massacre was kind of the beginning of the revolutionary white power movement when white supremacy, violent white supremacist groups had previously been kind of an extension, vigilante extensions of the state. But after the Vietnam War, there was a sense of betrayal after the civil rights movement and civil rights laws. White supremacists decided they had to overthrow the United States government. And so the groups that I have been writing about are the heirs of that legacy. And, it continued through Timothy McVeigh with the Oklahoma City bombing and the various mass shootings, massacre carried out by Dylan Roof. So, sorry, I tried to summarize as
You're doing just fine. Yeah, because the majority of your reporting, and specifically kind of what we are having you on today to talk about is sort of this new faction of neo-Nazi group. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that, like the I don't know, 2119 Blood and Soil crew.
Yeah, that's the specific group that I've written about, but they're part of a larger ecosystem, and there are other rival groups that are like them out there. So what I would say is they come out of the broader neo-Nazi movement that has emerged since January 6th, called the Active Clubs. The founder of the Active Clubs, Robert Rundo, is actually charged with inciting a riot, and a judge in California, federal judge, actually threw out his case. But in any case, they are kind of the more violent and extreme aspect of this Active Club movement. They're a lot younger teenagers, people who came of age or were adolescents during Donald Trump's first campaign in 2016. And there's been a lot of kind of pushback against the MAGA extremism from January 6th due to the prosecutions. And so these more violent and more extreme groups are kind of moving into that vacuum. And just to kind of wrap up, the activity that I wrote about is hate crimes, but vandalism attacks targeting Jews, African Americans, LGBTQ folks. It's important to say, though, that they aspire to more extreme violence because their online chatter is valorizing mass shooters and industrial sabotage. They're part of an accelerationist tendency in the white supremacist movement that rejects elections and political solutions to achieve their objectives. They feel like they need to bring about a collapse of American society. So that's how I would kind of.
So, that's fascinating and horrifying at the same time. Take a step back again, because I think the history is really important here for people who are listening to our show to understand kind of what's really going on. You're talking and I'll kind of summarize it and then have you speak on a little bit more of the history. What I'm hearing is that there's this new kind of surge of different hate groups that have, in particular, come into existence since the 2016 Donald Trump election, and then maybe even been accelerated after the 2020 election. Mm-hmm. And these groups are violent, or at least aspiring to violence. And there's this major goal, this kind of endpoint that they're going, where it's to essentially create a collapse of society that then creates a race war that then drives everyone who's not Anglo and white out of the United States, and then they rebuild the country as a white supremacist country. Is that the idea? What's the history? What's the overall goal? And how has this come? How have we come to this place here in America?
Yeah, great question. And I think you summarized the goals pretty well. And it goes back to, I always cite Kathleen Belew. She wrote a really excellent book called Bring the War Home, about the white power movement and the aftermath of Vietnam. She writes about, in 1983, there was kind of a convergence of revolutionary white power groups. And so their goal is to create a white ethno-state. They see it as incremental. They don't believe it's really, and they're right, it's not realistic to think they could just flip a switch and take control of the United States government. So they want to kind of create, just establish influence in rural, predominantly white areas like the Pacific Northwest, Appalachia, the Ozarks, and then kind of build a white ethno-state. So they see the necessity of breaking apart the United States. And then you were asking, like, how did we get here? So after Charlottesville in 2017, there was a big backlash against what was then called the alt-right movement because of the murder of Heather Heyer. So some of the groups in that coalition became more mainstream and concerned about optics, and others took a more kind of underground terrorist approach. And then we saw the rise of Atomwaffen and the base. Those two groups were largely dismantled in 2019, 2020 by the FBI. And so you saw that kind of terrorist activity, white supremacist terrorist activity abate for a while. And then, as I was saying earlier, when the prosecution of the January 6th defendants kind of put the MAGA movement on its heels, now this terrorist wing is kind of resurgent. That's kind of the sequence that I see.
Got it. And you said so this group in particular, the 2119. Yeah, like what's the significance of the name, the number? Is it linked to something?
I'm glad you asked, because I'm just so immersed in this stuff. I forget to state the obvious, but blood and soil is a Nazi slogan of the Third Reich. So they are, just to be clear, they are unabashedly, unapologetically pushing Nazism, and they talk about a Fourth Reich, so they see themselves as helping establish something that would replicate or succeed what Adolf Hitler did in Nazi Germany.
Yeah. So that's the blood and soil. Is the 2119? Is that like?
It's a numeric code, and you see a lot of neo-Nazi groups do this. Well, actually, any kind of gang, honestly. 2 equates to B for blood. 1 equates to A for and. 19 is S is the 19th letter of the alphabet, so 19 stands for soil.
Interesting. Oh, that's so weird. I remember when I was in college, one of my favorite bands was this band called 311, and I remember some of my friends were like, "Oh, that's a racist band, right? Because like 11 is like the 11th letter of the alphabet. It's K, and 3 it's like means it's KKK." And I'm like, I don't know about that, but
I don't think that's the case. But yeah, I hadn't heard that. But same logic.
Wow. Yeah, but yeah, it is weird how people sort of like use kind of like, I don't know, numerology to sort of make a point. But is this group primarily located in the South, or is it like a much broader network?
Oh, all over the country. So my story mentions that there are criminal cases being investigated in North Carolina and New Hampshire. Members are facing charges in Florida. There's documented activity in California. And really, due to the fact that they're organized through the internet, they're talking with people all over the world. So I've even heard that there are members who claim to be 2119 in the UK.
Dude, that's amazing. I mean, in a bad way.
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, like, this thing is so like spread all over the place. What exactly, how are they doing this? Can you kind of speak to how are they radicalizing kids, like young? I'm reading some of the articles
Yeah.
and posted kids as young as 13, 12, whatever, they can't drive. Leaders in the thing are 17 years old. It's like, what are 17-year-olds leading anything? What does that even mean? I mean, yeah, how are they doing this exactly?
Well, the power of the internet, and just to get kind of briefly to talk about the global aspect is, it is ironic that they call themselves nationalists, because they are really, they're more transnational than anything else. This really goes back a long time to the 1980s, that these groups have kind of reinforced each other across global boundaries. But the internet is the engine of radicalization, and it's also the thing that brings them across together across state lines and national lines. I've just been puzzling through this myself. But as I think about it, they are able to kind of create an online persona to where a 13-year-old can kind of adopt the persona of this 30-year-old paramilitary super soldier, and they project it to each other, and they say and share things that are shocking to build clout with each other. And part of the way that 2119 was organized, to my understanding, it was founded by Waylon Fowler, this 17-year-old who's currently facing charges for a brick attack against a synagogue in Pensacola. But it was started on a Discord channel, which is a way that just mainstream teenagers get together and chat about gaming. And he would kind of develop relationships, invite adolescents in, and push them towards discriminatory beliefs. And then they started this new thing called 2119, and they push the kids to show some in real life action, to put up a flyer or spray paint some graffiti and then post it on the channel. And so I guess it's just kind of like a feedback loop of online and in real life that kind of carries it forward. Does that answer your question? Because it is a really complex and dynamic, and we really understand so little of it, because I feel like we've only been in this space for about 10 years, where children's experiences online. And I've talked to experts who are saying, the internet that you knew a year ago is not the same internet that exists. And it's different for teenagers than it is for us, because all of us have algorithms that show us what they think we want to see to keep us engaged. And one of the experts pointed out to me that when 13-year-olds come online, they don't have the history that we do going back 15 years. And so TikTok or Instagram shows them what they use an algorithm for, a different subset of, I don't know how it's not their algorithm. It's
trying to build and understand what their interests are. And so it's throwing a massive amount of things at them just to kind of see where they click, what they look at, all that kind of stuff. And then it will begin to filter that down and make it more precise. When you talked about, Roblox, Waffen, or something like that. My son plays Roblox, and I know that he's got a lot of friends. Well, we're very controlling on who he's friends with, probably for this very reason. It reinforces it. But it's is it because these platforms, they don't allow access because of, they won't take these things down because of the ripple effect it would have to other groups if they started enforcing this stuff or letting law enforcement. I mean, it's a difficult problem because if you let law enforcement come in and just, you give them their Telegram. I saw a lot about Telegram.
Yeah.
You give them that account, you let law enforcement come in, and then what does that mean? So then we just know that the government has access to all of our stuff no matter what. And does that violate, our rights in some way? It's a difficult thing. And then I can feel your pain in that this is a hard nut to crack in terms of figuring out how all this stuff happens.
Yeah, I certainly don't have the expertise on technology and regulation, but I hear reporters talking about it. And I think I do come down on the regulation side. One person put it like, we created the internet. We dropped this bomb on our children. And we do have a responsibility to control it and to kind of protect our children from the toxic elements of it. I mean, the same way that we would regulate who comes in and out of a school building or a school grounds.
Yeah. So I'm really interested in kind of like how the organization or how they decide what crimes they want to commit. I mean, I'm just thinking like, is the radicalization like sort of very organic because you're kind of building this community and then you want to sort of like be one of the cool kids and, and then once you kind of are a cool kid, is it like on Telegram, you're like, hey, who wants to meet me at this synagogue and do some crimes? Like, is it like that? Or is it just basically just a one-upper kind of like organic type of, things that they do to try to impress everybody else?
Yeah, I looked at a lot of the Telegram channels, but I'm not privy to the very internal ones. But my understanding from what others have told me is that there's just a strong encouragement to do, what they would call in real life activities to show their commitment. But yeah, we're talking about teenagers. So most of them don't drive. So you can imagine that it would be a lot of solo activity. And then, there is a effort to kind of get like-minded people together who are in the same geographic space. So typically what I find with these types of groups is that if they live an hour or maybe 2 hours away from each other, they'll make some effort to meet in person. And 2119 leaders have talked about like getting together in person, doing national tours to meet with the members across the country. So yeah, that is a logistical challenge when you have a group that is, a couple dozen people that spread across the United States. Then obviously most of them are not going to meet in person.
Yeah, and I'm like, how are they funded? I mean, like, are they just using allowance money to buy the brick, to throw, or like to meet up with friends and whatnot?
That is a really good question, and I would just say, I mean, I've heard some things about some parents enabling it. I haven't been able to verify that, but I want to pursue that further.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hey, it's Will again to tell you about Heavenly Homeland, which is an ambitious project that draws from the past 4 years of our podcast to tell the story about Christian nationalism in 5 informative episodes. The episodes in the Heavenly Homeland series will address the belief that America was founded as a Christian nation, the separation of church and state, using the Bible as a tool of oppression, why evangelicals love Trump, and finally, an episode showing why not all Christians are Christian nationalists. We have over 24 experts from the world of academia, theology, constitutional law, mental health professionals, and so many more. The first episode airs on March 3rd, which happens to be the date Lemon v. Chrisman was heard at the Supreme Court. And if you're wondering what that is, well, wait till episode 2. You'll learn all about it. The remaining episodes are going to air every Saturday after that. This documentary is an invitation to explore, to understand, and to engage in a conversation that's more important now than ever. Whether you're a devout follower, a concerned citizen, or somewhere in between, there's something in this story for you. So if you haven't already, go ahead and smash that subscribe button on your podcast platform. It's right there. Just press it so you can make sure that you don't miss it when it comes out. Let's embark on this journey together, equipped with knowledge, empathy, and a willingness to listen to the myriad voices that make up this great nation of ours. Stay tuned, stay informed, and as always, make sure to keep your conversations not right, not left, but up. And let's keep bridging the gap between faith and politics with an open heart and an open mind. Thanks for listening, and enjoy the rest of the show.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating to me because you have this certain group of people that are going to be, number one, like I'm thinking about the amount of steps. I'm imagining my son, and I'm imagining the amount of intermediate steps that it's going to take, that it would take to get him like radicalized in that way, and what they would have to convince him of, and what my relationship with him would be like that I wouldn't know, or there wouldn't be regulation on what he's doing, or I wouldn't be checking in, right? There's a number of things that would start happening. I know you kind of covered this in your follow-up article to of your first one on Raw's story about the parents and how the parents were reacting to all this, and the kind of, you know, they didn't know what to do. They kind of at a loss. And even seeing like most kids, once they saw the potential legal consequences, right? Kids are getting like interviewed by the FBI. If I was in high school and I got the FBI taking me out of class to interview me, that would really scare me quite a bit. And I probably would want to change what I'm doing. And I'm just wondering, like, so, excuse me, this 2119, right? It sounds like it's, you know, it's a small group of people. Obviously, small groups of people can do big damage. They can do terrible damage. They have asymmetric information, so law enforcement don't know to potentially what they're planning, and you have protection from rights and, you know, things like that, where you can't just go in and you know, get their phone without a warrant, or go and, you know, it makes it more difficult for potentially law enforcement to predict these things, find these things. What is this like? Why is this so interesting to you, this group, and what connection does it have even to the larger issues that are like, I mean, again, it's not as if I'm saying that their potential violent acts are not important to cover or to understand or anything like that, but how does this connect to the broader movement that you're seeing, and what's really concerning you and driving you to look at and investigate this group, besides the fact that it's just terrible stuff they're saying and doing, but what's driving this interest in reporting this and making sure people know about it?
Well, yeah, I mean, what drove my interest is just when I started looking at the string of vandalism incidents and hate crimes back in this spring of the past year, and then seeing this group's name attached to it. So I was interested in what appears to be like a coordinated criminal enterprise. And I'm concerned that it's attached to a larger movement, the active club movement, that is very aggressive and kind of growing. And their ambition to, or their interest in these more extreme forms of terroristic violence. But as I was reporting it, I mean, the earlier part of your question, you were talking about the internet radicalization. And as I was reporting it, that suddenly became more important to me. That's not why I started reporting it. Yeah, I mean, in terms of the internet radicalization of children, I do think it's important to mention that neo-Nazi activity is just one subset of internet radicalization. There's a really good article that came out the same day as mine by Mac Lamoureux at Vice News, and it's about online self-harm cults that recruit children, and they, in the same way as 2119, they radicalize children, and then the children, when they become 16 or 17, then they are radicalizing and recruiting other children. Really vile stuff, encouraging children to cut themselves, and I mean the most vile and dehumanizing kinds of activities that you can imagine. But gosh, like my main point is that when I talked to Dana Kester, a professor at West Virginia University who studied online radicalization, she was saying if your child is on the internet, then they are exposed to white supremacy and any other toxic content you can imagine. I mean, this is just, I think, this is where it crosses the ideological divide. It doesn't matter whether we're right or left. We have to figure out how to deal with this as a society and to protect children. And there are no clear answers. I kind of, I hear you, Josh, about limiting children's, one's child's access. I kind of myself tend to take a harm reduction approach and realize that children are going to be online. I would be kind of hypocritical myself if I said just stay offline, because all of my research is and engagement right here is online. I think we need to teach children to be very wise and judicious in how they engage with the content and be critical about what they're seeing, and not just passive consumers.
Yeah, so I can imagine writing stories about neo-Nazis probably doesn't make you really popular amongst that group, because having read some of your articles, you're not necessarily advocating that neo-Nazis are, full of like rainbows and unicorns. So maybe you can talk to us a little bit about some of the challenges you've had, and even, some of the attacks that you have experienced yourself just reporting on this group.
Yeah, well, I wrote about it sidebar to my piece at Raw Story. But yeah, basically when I began investigating and reporting this story, and the 2119 members became aware that I was reporting on them, it was pretty intense backlash. They kind of trash talked me on Telegram, which I would not be, I'm kind of used to, but it escalated to harassing phone calls, warning that they were watching me, and invoking the brick there, obviously what was used to attack the synagogue in Pensacola, and surveillance. 2119 members ordered a pizza to be delivered at my house, and then somehow someone knew about the delivery and was outside and took my photograph while I talked to the delivery person, and it culminated with 6 neo-Nazis holding a 4-minute flash rally in front of my house about 10 days before the publication of the story. And so these are 2119 is part of a larger ecosystem, and they kind of called for support from these older neo-Nazis who have written about them as well. So I guess there was motivation of trying to prevent me from reporting and also retaliating for past reporting that I've done on others. But I mean, I'm not going to be intimidated and stop reporting on it. And if anything, this kind of validates the importance that they would go to such great lengths to try to suppress the truth. So,
yeah, I mean, that's got to be unnerving to experience that. What was that like experiencing that for the first time?
Well, I'm not going to say too much about the impact of it. Yeah, obviously it's not fun, but
yeah, that makes sense.
It's going to keep. I mean, whatever they want to bring. I mean, I was raised to, I was raised to ask the question, like, what would you do if the Nazis come to power, and like, how will you respond? And like the moral question of like, do you remove the train tracks of when they are taking people to concentration camps, or do you drop flyers from a dorm hall and take actions that would result in almost certain severe consequences? And this just seems pretty straightforward. We're reporters. We're reporting on the currents and political trends in our society, and reporting without fear or favor is a fundamental aspect of democracy. So I'm not going to stop reporting on them. I know many of my colleagues are also not going to be intimidated by this kind of thing.
Well, I appreciate your response, and definitely support you in that.
Thank you.
Do you feel like go ahead.
No, just thanks. I appreciate this.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're going to make an impact at some point, people are not going to be happy with you, especially if you're talking about something that, is important to them for whatever reason. And it's pretty amazing that you've been able to keep this going. And so I really, I do appreciate that, because we need people that are bold and are willing to speak against the evils that they see in society and take a stand. Do you feel like the law enforcement, maybe not, do you feel like what response have they been able to have? Not necessarily in your particular case, but I'm talking about more widely. What has this process been like for them to try to regulate this and, to try to quell this kind of stuff and react to this? It's very reactionary. it seems like, but maybe there's more proactive ways that law enforcement is doing to try to get ahead of this kind of stuff. What has been your experience? How have you seen the law enforcement respond, and what challenges do they face in this?
Yeah. I mean, law enforcement is definitely active in trying to build cases against violent extremists, and I mean, they prosecuted members of the base, that one of the groups that I mentioned that had talked about in January 2020, there was a Second Amendment rally in Richmond, Virginia, where thousands of people brought assault rifles into the state capitol. And these neo-Nazi groups had talked about bringing guns and shooting at people to instigate this kind of accelerationist collapse. And they were arrested shortly afterwards. Law enforcement uses informants to infiltrate these groups, and the neo-Nazis know it, and there is some degree of paranoia. I guess they have to get the evidence to build the cases. You do worry that the informants might kind of push things further than it needs to go to try to make the case. So they're incentivized to get people to do something criminal so that they can make a case. So I don't know. It's tricky, but they're certainly aware.
I mean, that sounds like so difficult and stressful to try to figure out.
Yeah, totally. And it's like it reminds me of I'm not sure how many of our listeners are familiar with like the old show 21 Jump Street, where like a bunch of these like high school kids are like secretly cops and trying to like solve crimes. In my mind, when you're like, they try to get informants, of like, who are they getting? You know, are they like going to, I don't know, the class, valedictorian or whatever, and be like, hey, we got a job for you. We need you to infiltrate this neo-Nazi group, which I don't know. Would probably be pretty cool and fun, maybe. I don't know, but I'm curious.
Like Street generation myself.
Okay, good. So it's not lost, at least on the three people on this call. So like what are the schools doing? I mean, since this is a population that's primarily young, kids, I'd imagine the schools are being informed, maybe like, hey, there's this like radicalized group that's sort of spreading in your area. Like, are the schools involved kind of with any of this?
Yeah, three of the members, three or maybe four, have said that they got kicked out of school. Not when my story came out, long before my story came out. Their activities came to light, locally, and they were forced to leave school. And I think that's understandable because they present a threat to other students, particularly Black and Jewish and LGBTQ students. But I don't know, on a broadly speaking, I don't know if your average principal, a middle school principal is or a high school principal is really thinking about this that much.
Yeah, I mean, to that end, what do you hope that this reporting does? I mean, are you how do you hope it impacts? Who do you hope will read it? And what kind of actions do you feel like you would hope that this would spark and inspire, from your perspective? What's most important that people do with this information besides just be freaked out?
Yeah, I hope it doesn't freak people out. That's always worries me, that like people will be shocked and then just shut down. But, one audience I'm very critical as a journalist and as a person of law enforcement. But I do appreciate people who work in law enforcement. And I guess that's one audience that I hope to reach. And I hope that they will kind of understand the contours. And I think mainly for law enforcement, I want them to understand that this is not like one or two bad actors. It is part of a collective, cohesive movement, and it has to be tackled as sometimes you have to, look at it as a conspiracy to violate civil rights. And I wish there was more prosecutions along those lines. Broadly speaking, I just want all of society to kind of be aware of what is unfolding and to respond as in whatever role they find to be appropriate.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about the law enforcement, and so like this side of it, you're hoping that they will take it and assimilate the information, understand it, become aware. Because why? Most law enforcements, they're unaware of this. They don't see it as a big issue. Like what's the motivation? Again, besides like understanding that what they're doing is wrong, right? And bad. And it's not, I mean, it's this racism is evil and it's hurting them as well, like their own internal heart, I believe, right? It's damaging their soul as a pastor. Right. That's what, greatly. And my prayer and hope would be that they would come to some kind of repentance and to turn around from this. But from the law enforcement standpoint, that's more a spiritual standpoint. From the law enforcement standpoint, the idea is like, what do you see as the issue that is occurring that you hope this will spark in the law enforcement? Ignorance, willful ignorance, right? Just kind of like, well, brushing it under the table. What do you think?
Yeah, I think there's a tendency with law enforcement to see this as like a localized, I hate to call it vandalism, that it's an attack on people. But you might see it as like a localized issue. Law enforcement might see it as a localized
like these
issue.
Are just some crazy teenagers or something like that. They're just being silly and we just gotta, whatever, just deal with it and move on.
And also to think, these are just teenagers who are just did something stupid as teenagers do. But if you look at the fact that they've been organizing, this group has been organizing for 2 to 3 years on the internet, I think it's important to look at the people who are organizing the activity and coordinating it online, as opposed to just those who commit the acts of vandalism or racial and ethnic intimidation.
So, Jordy, I guess what my last question for you is what's the next for your investigation? I mean, like what do you need? Who do you need to talk to really kind of gain a more comprehensive picture of, where this group is going next, and what would be important for the public to really take away from your reporting?
Well, that's a good question. I would say just looking forward, look at how groups, neo-Nazi teenage groups that are inclined towards terrorism, look at the hot button issues that they're going to exploit. Certainly the polarization around the presidential election, the ongoing war in Israel and Gaza is, something that neo-Nazi groups like this are going to play both sides and try to pit people against each other. ongoing. Look for them to kind of opportunistically latch on to various hot button issues that make people passionate and divide people, and to exploit those to erode trust. And also, white supremacist groups going back decades and decades are very good at rebranding. Now that there's a light being shown on 2119, they may change their name, or they may break into two groups or remerge with other groups. And so it's very fluid. But look at the kind of the currents of the movement and not the particular groups or players necessarily.
That's good. So I guess last question is, how can people follow you, stay up to date on your reporting, or if they've got a hot tip or something like that, how can folks connect with you?
Yeah, best way to connect with me is by email, Jordan, Jordan, @rawstory.com.
Got it. That's great. And appreciate you coming on. We have lots of journalists on the show, and I'm always just impressed by just the work that you folks do. I mean, putting yourselves kind of in harm's way, and it's like I don't know what it's like to be a journalist, but based on what I hear, see, and read, it looks like a very thankless profession. So I want to at least be one that does thank you for the work that you do, because it's not easy.